Hello, Leo.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, guys. I'm very pleased, with this invitation and can take part of the residency, even not making part of the residency when it happened in the beginning of the year. Thank you very much for showing up, guys. Lucas, my friend, my editor from Brazil is here, I'm glad that somebody from my gang showed up. And well, I'm gonna, at the first time of the lecture, I'm gonna present my work, what I call my portfolio, which is pretty much what I presented to PRAKSIS, all the projects that I've that I'm involved that are related to party. And after that, I'm gonna read one of two chapters of the latest book called A Sex Shop of Drugs and Food, which Lucas is the editor. And well, and I hope everything um, runs well, and after that we can talk a bit, okay? Thank you so much. Let's start then. My practical research on the party began more than 30 years ago when I was still just a club kid in my hometown, Porto Alegre, in southern Brazil. However, the turning point in my theoretical research was around 2012, when one day during a master's class where we were studying the Frankfurt School, I came across this quote by the grumpy Adorno. It unsettled me because until then, I have thought that I was having fun and partying precisely because I was rebelling against the norm, not conforming to it. So as a sort of a joke, I came up with what I call a theory for the critical party, which aimed to answer to Adorno's statement, proposing a festive practice, because in this field of research, theory is inseparable from practice, that would bring a critique of the status quo. It was therefore a proposal for the politicization of the party, a joke with a serious question behind it. I kept talking about it at parties and posting these ideas, always in a very provocative way in relation to the local scene at the time. I was sort of a Facebook cultural critic back then. Then in 2016, I met the Arruaça Collective. The collective had been formed in 2014 by students, mostly from public universities, people 20 years younger than me. What this group was proposing was to throw clandestine, free of charge electronic music parties on the streets. Simple as that. And most important, they claimed this was a political gesture. It's also important to remember the context of all this. This was the fourth term of the Workers' Party, Partido dos Trabalhadores, Lula's party in the country's presidency, with the population having secured basic social achievements. Some of the left began to pressure the government, demanding more changes. One of the most pressing issues was the demand for free public transportation. Tragically, this movement would eventually, on the eve of the 2014 World Cup, destabilize the government and lead to the impeachment of President Dilma Rousseff, which would ultimately contribute to the rise of the far right, a phenomenon that, as we know, is global. But nobody could foresee any of this at the time. The party collectives began to spread mainly throughout Brazil's south and southeast regions. The main demands of these young people were the occupation of public spaces, which were constantly undergoing privatization in line with neoliberal policies, and identity politics, which at that moment were primarily focused on gender issues, with a new feminist wave that found social media to be a privileged space for dissemination. The parties were quite precarious, always clandestine and unauthorized, often using stolen electricity from spots where it was possible to tap into public lighting, meaning that when daylight broke and the street lights turned off, the party would end. Over time, the local authorities began to learn the modus operandi of the collectives and started cracking down more and more on these gatherings. Today, there is a massive bureaucracy to get permission for street parties, which now sometimes require fees, and they occur much less frequently. However, they are more professional and structured than before. I ended up spending a lot of time with some members of the Arruaça collective in a very fruitful and inspiring exchange. At one point, I asked myself, how does one join a collective? Do I ask for permission to join in? Because when I realized I was already part of the group. I was reading Chris Krauss' I Love Dick, and there's a quote about love letters in it. It moved me, and I started writing letters to people from the scene. Usually, I send out a PDF and shared on Facebook or email to them. You can see Porto Alegre is signed in the map down here, you know. The city faced some floods in the beginning of the year, in last May. Maybe you'll see them through media. It was very tragic. It's in the most extreme south of Brazil. Here is a poster that we made for a specific party, you know, with some prints from Facebook and some slogans as "Let me dance," "You can do anything, but you cannot do anything." There's another one that is harder to translate. Raiou o dia, já era o gato. Gato is like, gato, it means cat in Portuguese, but it's how we call the illegal connection, stole of energy, you know? So the day was rise, yeah, the gato is gone, you know? The cat is gone because you cannot use the energy because of the photoelectric sensors in the street lighting. Meanwhile, I continue my academic career to pursue a PhD in the UK, attending many international events and publishing articles. Researching on Jubilee, a film by Derek Jarman, I studied punk for my master's. I came across this quote, "Art history as makeup." There's a wordplay here because Jarman was referring to the film's protagonist makeup. Here you can see Jordan with the makeup, but also, of course, about the idea of creating and inventing, art history as an invention. Shortly after, I participated in an art history congress in Vienna, where I adapted Jarman's quote. I intended to apply the cut-up method to art history. The cut-up is a writing technique borrowed from painting, a type of collage based on two main elements, appropriation and chance. I thought about randomly cutting and mixing art history with other types of texts to see if a problem would emerge from that process. It was quite naive because, in fact, there is no need for any of that. You just had to read the table of contents of any art history book to see what the problem was. A history written by and about cisgender white men, mostly European. But anyway, that was when I started to want to work with this method of writing. But on the other hand, I found it hard to imagine this form of writing having any place in academia. So this is something that in Porto, here in Porto also, here an article for a Spanish magazine. At that point, I was immersed in the party scene, participating in other collectives that were variations of a certain core group from the Arruaça collective. And I was writing a lot about all of it. Reports for local newspapers, letters, academic essays, and many social media posts. The after parties at my apartment were where the conversations happened, where we planned the next actions and engaged in a lot of self-criticism, always under the influence of many drugs, confronting the contradictions that arise when you propose partying as a political act within a capitalist system in a country such as Brazil that is racist, classist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, and marked by brutal social inequality. The after party was where all the thinking about the critical party radiated from. So this is a party in Porto Alegre. This text is like a poem or something like that I wrote about the party. We can read it. I perceive the dance floor as a small mirror that reflects and distorts everything around it. Not only our social relationships of the political, economic, and affective structures, forces of violence and desire. I would venture to say that it also reflects the entire cosmos, its orbiting celestial bodies, interplanetary collisions, supernovas, pulsars, and quasars. Here's another party from another collective. And then the porta potty, I guess, is that right? How many, it's porta potty, is that? Became an icon of our movement between quotes. Anarchic, dirty, chemical, a temporary artificial deposit for the organic, a sort of a portal that would take us to other worlds. We started to use this image. I gave a lecture to Ted once, about the porta potty. And all of these unfolded into parties, texts of any sort, art shows, etc. This one was an art show, for example, that was held in a friend's apartment on a Sunday morning during an after party. My involvement with this kind of scene dates back to 1992, when I opened a bar with two other friends. I was 19 years old. The bar ended up having some importance for Porto Alegre during the 90s. And in 2004, I started writing its memoirs. The process was quite lengthy, but 10 years later, the book was finally published and ended up becoming a local bestseller. In any case, the book had some important elements. A non-fiction text, despite the narrative being very close to fiction, written in the first person, dealing with a scene, a certain subculture, in this case, more rock and roll oriented, with sharp and self-depreciating humor. This is the book, we had some illustrations from artists from Porto Alegre, by artists from Porto Alegre. Then one day after a party with some people sleeping on my couch, I started writing, and I realized that if I compile the things I have been reading over the past months or maybe years and work on them a bit more, I could have another book similar to the previous one, but this time with greater complexity, bringing in my academic and theoretical background. A História Universal do After, a universal history of the after party, was published when I was already living in São Paulo in 2019. And the book has a lot of different genres, like the letters, newspaper reports, poems, a manifesto. That one is a manifesto, and academic essays, etc., etc. In a sense, the work is a parody. The work mocks the academic discourse. Some people have been referred to it as autoethnography. It is, in a sense, pseudoscience. The researcher's object of study is the party, but in the research process, he is unable to maintain any sort of scientific distance. He merges with his object, and the theory blends with drug-induced delirium, almost as if confronting the boundaries of science. As in the previous book, there is a relationship between the first person, confessional, autobiographical, subjective narrative, and a collective dimension of an experience intensely shared by a certain group. It is an attempt to narrate lived experience in all its intensity through a form that matches its content. Here, form and content are inseparable. Because of that, I think it produces a document of its time. In this case, I see a sort of underlying background, the rise of fascism. There is a permanent oscillation between full engagement with the idea of the party as a political act and a profound skepticism about whether that's even possible within the context of capitalism, which absorbs everything into itself, neutralizing any deviant energy. This interplay between belief and distrust, in my opinion, ends up creating a movement close to dance. There are two main settings for this experience. One, the dance floor, because it's a narrative that doesn't deal primarily with music, but rather with dance, exploring the idea of choreography, which is also a form of writing. The second setting is the place of indetermination and dissociation of the after party, where the habitus of the scene is created. For me, the after party is a kind of contemporary potlatch, a ritual of irrational resource depletion in a commodified world, a useless accomplishment that, through its singular uselessness, borders on play and poetry. During this process, I realized that, unlike the previous book, in which I was recounting past memories, this time I was writing in the heat of the moment, often right after coming home from the parties. One day I understood that I was writing the script for my departure from Porto Alegre, a city I had lived in for 30 years. I was writing about the future. There is also this approach to theory as a kind of a shared collective delirium. And it's important to highlight that this all came about with the introduction of a drug that had been entirely alien to my party kit until then, ketamine. With its dissociative random effects, it somehow resembled the cut-up method, like a roll of the dice thrown at random. In a way, this book is the result of a kind of a breakdown after prolonged use of ketamine. And it was by chance that the book, which had a small print run of 300 copies in Brazil and a very poor distribution, ended up being translated into Spanish and published by an amazing and very important publisher called Caja Negra, which has distribution throughout much of the Spanish-speaking world. The Caja Negra edition has already sold over 3,000 copies. It was released in the same collection, Efectos Colaterales, that also published Mackenzie Wark's Reverse Cowgirl and Raving. That's how she came into contact with the text and ended up including one of its chapters in the Black Rave issue of the e-flux journal. And that brings us finally to the theme of this lecture, Um, this little novel was written in 2018, shortly after I arrived in São Paulo. I didn't even have furniture in my current apartment yet, just a mattress and a fridge. Sitting on the floor of the living room, I wrote the novel in a few months using the cut-up method, which I had already experimented with in 3 chapters of A Universal History of the After Party. But this time, by appropriating texts written in English, it is entirely fictional, highly experimental, written in a language I don't master. And here, once again, there is a parodic strategy, but this time related to the idea of the avant-garde, of a counterculture. After all, I was using a method typical of the avant-garde. It has that desire to shock, which is typical of some moments in the 20th century avant-garde, bordering on radical political expressions, both on the left and the right. I see this narrative as something akin to theater, as it also emulates the resources of a play, or maybe even an opera, because it has text, music, settings, etc. It's cynical also, expressing a sense of delusionment with a world that is beginning to reorder itself. It's more ambiguous in the movement between engagement and distrust, expressing a certain repulsion. It might even be violent, I'm not sure. Well, you can see for yourselves. I'm gonna share, I guess, the text so you can read also with me, you know. Just a minute. Well, so we have these characters. Rama, she's the DJ. Me as the author. But the thing is, me is the name of the character. So it's a me in the third person. And when I translated to Portuguese, because I later translated into Portuguese, it is eu, I. So it's a thing that I wouldn't do if I was writing in Portuguese, you know. Such a thing, you know, such an aggressive way of writing, because I was telling Christian that it's sort of when you are a child and you don't know the lyric of the song and you sing the song in the same way, like chanting it, like more like sounds than words that have meanings. So I guess the book in English has a bit of this sense, you know. Here are the sections, the chapters. And I refer to the police as it, not as them, like the police was an entity, not real person, not real people. So I'm going to read the first chapter, which is an interview that I stole many questions from Freeze magazine. But I changed the title to Freeze, which is the interpolation that police does, you know, police do to people on the street. So let's shall begin. What is art's responsibility to the times in which we live? Art makes violence safe. I'm concerned with precisely manipulating words and images to create an unstoppable movement of destruction. I use art to deprogram myself away from my misbeliefs and corrupt the young. What is most interesting about it is the formula required to dissolve any delusions. The poison must be used against poison. The error is to mistake guerrilla warfare for ego tripping. Experience is when you subvert the moral quality that all curators should have. The word curate means quite literally to care for. I don't care. Art for me is selling like it is. Where do we go from here? Strutting down the catwalk in altered states of consciousness and back again and again towards the end of the world. It's like LSD. You can find the perfect gift traveling into inner space on a sticky Wednesday afternoon while listening to a Spotify playlist, that disco beat. You better close your eyes and pay attention to what the algorithm recommends to you. Is love important? Better horny than bored. I mean, romantic love doesn't concern love at all, but concerns power. Everything revolves around pleasure. Sexuality is seen as a compulsion as much as the need for drugs or food. I believe there are no reasons not to feed each other. My goal is to be able to talk to people I fuck and fuck people I like taking drugs with. Language is such a dirty word. On the verge of becoming a famous writer, just as I had dreamed, I know I need to come up with another book. This time I'm going to try something more explicitly experimental. It may be love. What about dancing? Dancing for me is doing what needs to be done. There is much reason to believe that the will to dance underlines the way we have been evolving as a species. All revolution has a rhythm. There is music, there are the fires, there is violence, there is beauty. How could I possibly forget that the main things that are going on are out of history? The streets are worse than I've ever seen. What's the difference between anarchism and an empty bag? Both of them are full of dreams of freedom. Freedom is probably the main source of incurable human restlessness, but it was completely kidnapped by individualism. We completely fail to understand the application of it in the conditions of daily life. Are you detoxing? The distractions, the gossip, the hedonistic ethos, all of those deadly little things are good for my work, but I never have fun. Before I left guilty, I broke up with all of my friends. I think it is important to keep in mind that I was engaged in a desperate existence at the time. I felt myself locked apart from my own prison. But while there is life, there is rope. Yet I could imagine no way in which I could be me. Can euphoria stay with you as you grow older? Enthusiasm is not enough. It takes discipline. Nature is tough though. I'd rather do coke than drink it. What do you think of death? When I faced the risk of death for the first time, I was at the same time delighted and disappointed. This is hard to explain. It's living in constant fear of death, not death itself, that scares us most. Death is just not seen as the worst of all possible things. Its irreversibility is nothing more than a fact of modern science. I would really like to have a body that already died and die once more. I often say that make the dead themselves dead again. I'm worrying about living. What do you do to have so many followers? I'm no leader, I'm my own follower. Yet I'm proud to connect thousands of people with no point. Social media takes within itself the corpse of a dead poet. I praise the way that it creates banality from astonishment, that low-level happiness that makes us wonder about nothing. I also think everybody should have sexual relations via social media. Share nudes, take a nap, dream of fuck. Sex is the most important fragment in our mutilated life. You already have love, glory, and beauty. What's missing in your life? Narcissism is a furious act of political defiance. The hipster bohemian rebellion sold only 500,000 copies. I'm not more relevant than Chicago. I think I'm going to read one more, okay? This is the chapter where, well, there's a party here, you know. The Great Comeback. A crowd is blocking the traffic in front of the old Parliament building. How do you try to stop 10,000 people from partying? Everybody's dancing and smoking dope in the streets of idiotic pleasure. The streets belong to the people. He's in a frenzied mood. He's wearing a shirt about 60 million size too big. T. I just caught a glimpse of a naked bride. She was coming down the stairs when I heard a voice whisper, "Your baby is sleeping behind the glass." The speech was so trance-like in its pictorial effect, so invasive in this, well, sorry, that me was unable to hear it. T would not shut up. T. It is understood that the 27-year-old is the most critical victim of Saturn's return, and this is applied especially to rock stars. Me, I'm not part of this club. T takes a bag from his own jeans back pockets. Take care, the police may come back at any moment. Think that snow is falling from my bag. Think that snow is falling everywhere all the time from my bag. Just give me some poison and then I go dance. Dancing actually assured a rather vehement distraction by making violence acceptable. You must be aware that the party is a matrix from which all traditional behavior toward class issues today appear in a new form. The discussions that T and me had dealt with the freedom being assumed by people who agree that the ultimate goal seemed to be the chance not to. I don't know if it makes sense, this phrase. Okay. What do you mean, sniffing? I doubt it's even possible to disaggregate dancing from protesting, when dancing constitutes a kind of a protest and entails its own alternations of identity and subjectivity. D. Dancers today are secret workers inside the capitalist production process. The situations into which dancing is usually brought may not touch the actual system of political struggle. Want some more? We are not dancing at a club, but in the streets at a time when streets are protesting sites. Urban riots extend the literal meaning of dancing. Sniffing. I have higher ambitions than just dancing in the streets. I see. You want to be a professor in a school for scandals. Leave that to me. Scandal is now founded on polytechnic rather than specialized training, and thus becomes common property. I'm for the total eradication of the traditional value of cultural heritage. Scholars are limited. The only reason you should be in college is to destroy it. Oh, go on, shit on the structure. Take the physical shock effect out of the diapers in which Dadaism was built. The avant-garde had us caned hopelessly in a tin. I could blow this tin can from inside if the idea of changing anything from within hadn't exploded long ago. Mind if I take over? T calmly and adventurously gives me the bag full of white powder. The Cultural Revolution requires people to change how they live and act rather than pass judgment on how others are proceeding. The cultural view creates outlaws. Politics breeds organizers. I know that crap. Be an outlaw, be a hero. Last night I woke up with some mother screaming fucking murder because a 16-year-old kid was shot 3 times dead in the back by the police. The boy was black. And I always remember what it was that scared me that night. The police is coming back. Every breath you take, every move you make, every hand you break, every step you take, I'll be watching you. T and me observed the absurd paramilitary operation unfolding on the sidewalks where kids had been dancing moments before. Some punks start throwing bricks from a vacant lot at an official car that was passing, and suddenly some unholders lock and load, and 50 policemen drop to their knees and jack shells containing Hurt-sized charges of buckshot into the chambers of their riot guns. The insanity of 50 loaded shotguns on a city street. Everyone scattered in panic, screaming, "Can you hear it?" The contemporary crisis is a big noise in middle-class society. I call middle-class society one that becomes attached to predetermined forms. Break up and move along, screaming back, "I was born there. Back in, hey, back in line." The odds against tomorrow grew in a contest of survival. We must conceive other forms of living, otherwise we'll keep on dying. Up against the wall, motherfucker. This is a stick up. Muttering. I can no longer think what I want to think. My thoughts have been replaced by pixel images. Shut up, assholes. Only those who know what it's like to be defeated can reach true love. It sounds like Leonard Cohen. I said, shut the fuck up, shouting. Let's call all demons, all legends, all mythologies and all myths, all founders of religion and the very religions. They are now reduced to a pixel video frame with funny subtitles. Freeze, motherfucker. A voice yelled, they're running. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The streets were windy with smoke. It's hard to believe that it was just another party. T and me were decided not to look back. They listened to the war talk and shouting for a while until it became a whisper, and then they stopped. T, heavy breathing. The political situation sometimes seems like a parody of our most frightening dreams. Reality descends into darkness faster than fiction. I propose we make up a poem amid the far-flung ruins and debris of the White House. This poem is for real. I'm for real too. T and me look at each other and start to laugh. Me, bring the dynamite. T, we got a leader, a misfit called Rama. She was arrested and locked inside the White House for 2 years, tortured and brutally treated. Blonde ambition had kept her dancing for 12 to 18 hours a day. She somehow managed to escape. She knows all the dirty methods used by the police. I have to meet her. Ravers don't trust you. They think you're a kind of a provocateur. Me started to talk mostly about himself, describing the many roles he could play as a member of the underground movement. The guy was enthusiastic, buzzed by drugs, and began riffing about what he was into. All his keys to being a political hipster. He got trapped by his own ego. Give up jobs, be with people, defend against poverty. Theater is territory, a space for existing outside padded walls. Setting down on stage declares a universal pardon for imagination. How would real wardens react to life actors on liberated ground? How can the intrinsic freedom of theater illuminate walls and show the weak spots where a breakout could occur? T. I mock the revolutionary movement of masquerade. You must fall asleep to fantastic dreams of grandeur every night. Me, I can't sleep. I guess it's okay. Thank you. I'm sorry.
No,
Wow, the tour de force.
Would you like us to turn it over to conversation now?
Yes, we can talk now. What you think? Do you have any questions or any comments? I would love to hear about the English, because for me, it's the first time that, like 2 weeks ago, read one of the few chapters in a literary event in Porto Alegre, but in Portuguese. It was kind of awkward because I felt people was kind of scared, and I choose some chapters that I guess is more violent than these ones. But it's the first time I'm reading it in English for people who speak English and are native speakers, probably. So it would be great if you can give me some feedback. Well, if you may, if you want to. Thank you anyway for the
Thank you,
opportunity.
Leo. I know we all really appreciate getting to hear from you, and including getting to hear that reading of the new book. So we appreciate that very much. I have maybe a question first, and then I'll pass it over to Kristen, who raised a hand. Just for the last book, I just want to reiterate how you talked about how it was constructed. So when you say that you're sort of using this like cut up like fashion for writing, are you pulling from existing notes and text and literally collaging them? Or are you, say a little bit more about that process?
Yeah, well, the original cut-up method was discovered, I don't know if this is the word, by Brian Geising. Brian Geising is a poet and painter. Um, he was related to the beatnik group, and he was very close to William Burroughs. And the legend says that one day in Paris, I don't remember the name of the hotel, but it's a very important hotel in Paris, the Beat Hotel, it later to be known. Brian Geising called Burroughs and said, "What? Look at what I discovered." He was working with a knife, but the paper was like folding the table, and this cut-ups emerged, and he started to use this, and so. Burroughs, he typed the texts that he wanted to appropriate from, and he cut in parts and changed and combined the parts. Sometimes I use printed books, but I later made up a way that we can do this on Word, with the program, typing program. So I retype and then I change, and then it has a lot of rewriting. It's not just like copying the original sentences, and it has a lot of rewriting.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, for but the way Burroughs uses like creators like images, this surreal and psychedelic images, but I was trying to use that form of narrative with scenes, with action. So for the interview, I guess it works. It works real good because it just somebody saying things. But for describing scenes and including actions and characters, it's harder, to to make a thing that makes sense. But uh, I guess it's senseless, has a sense in the end. There's this line between what it makes sense and these things that you don't understand very well. And I use
But
a lot of, I'm sorry, Shannon.
oh no, go ahead.
No, I use it a lot of, like authors related to the counterculture, such as Burroughs, Kerouac, and Valerie Solanas, Hunter Thompson, this kind of, but also art magazines and gossip magazines, fashion magazine, any type of text that I came up, that I Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
that
you.
was the second part of my question. But none of your own like notes or notebooks, like all of the text is collaged from other authors, and then you are making some sort of like editorial polish or changes to make it flow.
Yeah, I'm putting something of me also. And well, the White House is a prison. I don't know if you got it. It's a prison where the prisoners are forced to dance endlessly for forever. You know, this idea that the party is for protest but also prison. Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Christian?
Yeah, that was perfect because that was where my question was going to go, basically with the last sentence you had. Yeah, there's an exchange where me and T are discussing whether dance is a protest or whether the secret work is for the capitalist system, basically.
Yeah,
And that made me think about something that you talked about and written about earlier, I think, which is how work and leisure is sort of blending in late capitalist societies. And I suppose my question is not so much whether that's true or not, but how does that manifest in the party, and does it matter for the party goer, if you know what I mean?
yeah. Well, I guess during my research, I became interested in economy, you know, and to know about economy because I was thinking that we are dancing to the changes in capitalism, you know, this idea that the factory, the warehouse, that the places where the industrial capitalism was working, you know, they now obsolete and they turn into leisure spaces for partying. And then Baudrillard says that with the disappearance of the factory, it doesn't mean that the work disappeared. It means that the work is fragmented and spread to all spheres of life, of society. So I started to think that, well, we were working. I used to say that trabalho de pista, work, we are working on the dance floor, you know, you are working for, I guess, working, creating our own identities, you know, and producing ourselves endlessly, you know, because of these things here now that you're uh, slaves, you know, and I guess the leisure and the pleasure and the work are all are merged. There's no difference between them, and this is a thing that I'm researching, and I'm reading Byung-Chul Han. You know, the Korean, German Korea philosopher. He's saying like the 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 burnout society. You know, the burnout society. The end of the disappearance of the rituals. The last party I went, I observed people dancing. You know, it's like it's a dance of minimal movements. You know, like it's a dance for an exhausted body. You know, it's a dance for people that are always exhausted. You know, so I'm thinking these things, and I guess the after party is my utopian. I don't like very much this idea of utopia, but I agree with Mackenzie Ward when she says that it's not resistance, it's not utopia, but I guess the after party for me it's something like this utopian space where we can we don't need to produce. We can forget to charge our devices, you know, and stop working. So I think the party goers are working for capitalism in a sense.
Tor?
Here are the covers of the book, you know, because we just changed the off to the. Lucas, it's with the camera closed. Um, the book is very cute.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I had thanks. I really enjoyed the reading and your talk quite a bit. I want to know, like, in writing the book, do you have a kind of ulterior fantasy for it? Because the structuring like a script automatically makes me wonder if you sort of envisioned this being performed in some way, or as a film or something. And then I just wondered if you also then had sort of fantasies about a kind of atypical way that it would be performed, or is it performed within the vestige of a party or some kind of other structure?
Yeah, actually, I would love that this could transform into a physical thing, into a play or into an opera. I see it as an opera, you know, because there are the settings and you can almost listen to the music playing all the time. And we have this project of doing some readings with characters, you know, but we couldn't do it yet. But yeah, I see it as a film in a sense, because I guess there is this, yeah, this media vibe, you know. The book that I'm writing now, it's called Rave Exploitation, and I guess it goes further in this idea that is a movie, you know. It's like a scene where the zombies appear at the rave, so it's like this slasher movie, just but in a way in the form of a book. So I have this pretentious idea that this can one day ended up as a film or as a play or as a performance. Yeah, thank you. Hi,
I
Nicholas.
can do one more, returning to the theme. Okay, but Sarah is also. Yeah, Sarah, do you want to go? Okay, I'll go first then. It's again returning to work and leisure, because quite early on in the talk, you talked about explaining these ideas at parties all the time.
Excuse me, I don't.
So early on, you said, "Oh, I had this idea about the party." Sort of theoretical ideas about the party that you would tell people about while being at a party.
Yes.
Yes.
All the time, all the time. I think we cannot dissociate the body and the mind, you know. So the party is a place for thinking, you know, for thoughts, for that's the idea, you know, for delirium, for
Yeah. So has this
all this theory was born in the parties, in the after parties, and the smoke areas and smoking areas. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
So
very
basically,
organic.
that was it. Whether this sort of ethnographic field work while partying, doing ketamine, has shifted your perspective on the party, but obviously it sounds like it's one thing as well for you. So
Yeah, you're right.
all right, I'm gonna pass it on to Sarah then.
Thanks. Yeah, Leo, this is great. This is I have a lot of thoughts. There's something particular to this cut up style that makes like these small snippets make a really quick rhythm. It has this kind of like dance tempo musicality. And it seems kind of like appropriate to like the energy that the text generates, for at least for me as someone hearing it. And like I feel like a real sense of like bravado in the case, like in the face of constant attack and almost certain defeat. So I am thinking about violence and what that might mean to you, like as something directed against you, and also maybe as something that you generate in the party that like, is violence for you destructive or constructive? If it is building anything, is the party capable of building anything, or does it all just kind of like shake down to the foundations at the end? Or does it generate the conditions for building something else? This kind of like what's the tempo of a like surplus population in the ruins of a post-industrial economy? Just like a little question.
Thank you, Sarah. It's a good question. It's a very good one. Yes, what I say to what I used to say to the collective people, you know, in the collective, that you cannot forget that Brazil is a very violent place, you know, that racism is out there, you know, it's here, it's not out there, it's here, you know, and I guess slavery still persists here in Brazil. So it's very contradictory to engage in this political act of partying, of pursuing pleasure, you know, in such contests. But again, I guess we have to learn from these people, you know, because if you think that carnival, you know, is that expression of joy, of pleasure that was born after slavery or during slavery, you know. So I guess the people from the Black diaspora can teach us what is how to be political as while partying, you know. And so I guess we need to remember this, you know, even when we are glad and we are enjoying the party, you know. So I guess the party has this potential capability of, I don't know, of start things, you know, of bring fire to things, but we cannot be naive, you know, because later it would be captured by things, you know. We need to move all the time because the right wingers will learn from us, you know, from our strategies. Well, this is a thing that we know about fascism, that they stole our ideas. They do it better in a sense because they don't have any scruple and nothing, you know, to I don't know, to compromise other than their selves, you know. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question actually.
Can I just, I'm sorry, Nicholas, I think to say it back to you, and what I think I'm understanding is that like you want to build something and then move on quickly so there's nothing to capture.
Yeah, I guess
Yeah,
that is
okay.
the thing. That is the thing, yeah.
Yeah,
We need to
thank
move
you.
fast, yeah. Because yeah, we're trying to in this process of trying to write about this, it needs to be fast because yeah, because the thing is fast. And I think that content is not different from form, you know, in the sense we need in the writing, you have to feel this tempo, this energy, this delirium, you know, in the way that it's written. Yeah, and we need to move fast indeed. Thank you. Nicholas?
Yeah, thank you. So you talked a little bit about your thinking about the party in relation to kind of forms of economy, living under capitalism. And you know, capitalism has this kind of almost infinite capacity to co-opt pure ideas, right? Like people start with this, yeah, it's going to be about sharing and creating space, and before you know it, like someone's buying it out, and it's kind of, you know, it's becoming Airbnb, for example, or something.
Yeah.
Like couch surfing. Yeah, so like I kind of wondered about your perspective on this, thinking about things like the bar that you ran, the role that you said. Like, it sounds like there may be moments where you've come in contact with this kind of community-driven things that have then become very popular and like becoming more mainstream. And yeah, like what you think about this, and like whether you came up with ideas either to sort of like ways of sticking to your ideals, or if there are moments where like being co-opted can be positive. Yeah, I don't know what your thoughts about capitalism,
Yeah, I don't.
corruption, and the party. I don't know if you have thoughts around that.
Yeah. Well, what can I say to you? I work nowadays in the art market. You know, I've never imagined that I could work, you know, in such environment. So as a former punk, you know, shame to myself, but but I don't know. We must keep trying, you know. We must be fast, you know, and we must think fast. And I don't know. Yeah, because I believe in this situationist idea of captura e recuperação, né? I don't know in English is capture and deviation. I don't know which are the translation to the terms in English. In Portuguese is captura e desvio, the détournement. This idea that the détournement is very close to the cut up. Is appropriation, and you see that is the things are, those are my influences. We need to always think in a different way, and a lot of self-criticism to face this contradiction that, well, how come party can be political, you know? In what sense party can be political within this capitalist world? So yeah, we need to, I don't know, to make up things, you know. Yeah, I mean, we need fiction. In a sense, we need fiction to face it. Shannon.
Back to Shannon, yeah.
Thank you, Nicholas, for the question.
I think it just between the last couple of questions, maybe this is less a question and more just like a prompt for conversation, but thinking about this cut-up style of writing, and then you saying that we have to be fast to resist these forms being kind of capitalized on. So I guess I started thinking about what can be left behind, like what kind of residue can be left behind that is either abstracted or fragmented enough that it can't be kind of recapitulated in a capitalist form. So like what can be archived that then can't be sort of stolen, or by people with no scruples, what can't be used as sort of the evidence or the basis of materials and ingredients to be exploited. And so I think it just I went back to this cut up writing form and sort of thinking about that as the form at which you are creating these texts as a way of sort of fragmenting the material enough that it's not totally cohesive, like that form sort of like naturally matches the politics that you're referring to of having to be fast or having to be fragmented or not leaving something behind that can be kind of exploited. Does that make sense? Not a question.
Yeah, I
but,
think it makes sense. One thing that I always think that during like the postmodern moment in the 80s, like of the appropriation art, this idea of appropriation was the main tool for art. And today, this idea of appropriation has a medical problem in it, because from which we are appropriating, we've been appropriating from the Black culture forever, like techno is Black, as Mackenzie says, and so I guess that is the medical limit, I cannot stole. While I was writing these one day, I thought, well, I'm gonna see some Angela Davis texts. I couldn't, use it because, well, I'm gonna rip off a Black woman again, as a white man. So yeah, I don't know if I'm answering it, but I think there is an ethics in this, it's not like stealing whatever I can put my hands
Yeah.
on, you know.
Yeah, no, and I think I'm thinking less that you're doing the theft that you're sort of referring to fascism engaging in, and more that you almost have to fragment or pull apart the form that you're talking about in order for it not to be I guess easily transmitted, you know, easily copied, easily appropriated, like that the act of sort of theorizing or documenting it, you're coding it in a way, or you're sort of disguising it by using these fragments.
It-
Yeah.
It's an interesting view. It's an interesting view. Thank you, Shannon. Yeah, because I think, well, I studied punk at my master's, and nowadays I think, I don't know, Trump is punk in a sense, you know. Bolsonaro is a punk figure. They don't care, you know. I don't care that wow, Sid Vicious, I don't know, the Johnny Rotten, I don't care. They sing like that. Trump doesn't care, you know. So I guess things now are different, and fascism is, it's very close, you know. It's in the scene, and this idea of rebellion, of radical politics, you know, we can go to the left, but well, but sometimes get close to the right, you know. But yeah, but I love this idea that it must be fragment, not to the intention of not being captured. Sounds good.
I mean, I think that's a really interesting point about the, you know, punk or like anarchism can be appropriated by the left, but it can, or used by the left, but it can also be, you know, right leaning as well. It's, I had a slightly, I think it's almost a follow-on question or connected with what Shannon was saying about, you know, like ways of archiving and kind of recording the party like outside of the, you know, it being co-opted. But similarly, I was thinking about like the issues with promoting illegal parties, and you know, you showed some, or like illegal parties, or like parties that are for specific groups of people. How you yeah, how you've thought about doing that. I imagine it's a lot of word of mouth, but you also showed posters, and like how you reach your communities, I suppose, was something I wondered about.
Yeah, I think through social media, you know, this is the problem. We are inside the corporations, you know, just this is, I guess this is the worst thing, you know. Our life is completely mediated by the corporations, you know. We cannot do anything without sharing it on Instagram. Is really depressing, you know. But yeah.
Sorry for this quick interjection, but it just makes me think of like old rave flyers that, you know, were like just this big and like stuck in a phone booth, like, you know, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, like that's the ephemera of it. There was no other like, you know, permanent advertising or documentation. It was just kind of like tiny little flyers that you'd like find tucked in places. Like that's how you, or word of mouth, right? But it wasn't,
Yeah,
and it was
now,
like that, like speaking of cut and paste, it was like cut and paste graphic design, you know, just in that kind of like zine style of making.
yeah, you don't
Different
see this
material
anymore.
culture.
You
Yeah.
don't see this anymore. Yeah. Fergus?
Yeah, thanks. I just yeah that just reminds me a lot of kind of just this conversation. Reminds me of Mackenzie's photographs that she showed last week, and that they're like similarly kind of ambiguous and kind of poetic, or almost they're just play their color and light and shape, and they're just like a fragment of the party that's kind of hard to distinguish. And I think that kind of relates nicely in a way to how we're talking about the text, that it's kind of there's a like an impression of it rather than it's not kind of explicitly said, and also like kind of pixelated and broken up. I just think that's quite a nice way of thinking about those two next to each other.
Thank you. I guess it has sense. In the Caja Negra edition, we used some photos, some images, because I was insecure about the book, because it's so personal. And then for the Argentine edition, we reproduced like posters and also photos of my friend Ivy Maiga Bugrimenko. She's a great photographer, and she documents the scene for, I guess, many years, like 7 years or almost 10 years, the punk and techno scene. And so I guess it's a good companion to the book, the images, and then it brings close to the document, to fiction.
You don't have that, nobody's translated it into English yet, is that correct?
Yeah, we had this chapter in the e-flux,
Yeah.
and then with the invitation of Dilettante Army, thank you, Sarah. We're gonna translate 2 more chapters, and I'm very happy. I'm working myself on it using the tools, the tools available. Yeah, but I think it's great to share it. Thank you so much, Sarah and Christian and all you guys from Partias Forum.
We are coming up about 8 minutes short of our mark for the day. Is there any other questions or conversation people want to put into the room before we wrap? I see, Sarah, you're about to say something.
Lexi?
I can also say something. I was at a language class all day and my brain is like mushy in between 2 languages. So I'm really struggling to like formulate anything that makes sense because I've been speaking Norwegian all day. But I just wanted to say thank you and like, sorry, my brain is a little mushy and I can't think of anything like beautiful and poetic to say to your wonderful presentation that I feel like on another day I'd have like a million questions and points, but I like hope we have some time to like talk another time. And the only thing that I wanted to mention, like I'm also a bit of a Chris Kraus fangirl, and I just really love like her assertion that all writing is fiction. And I think that there's like some resonance there between like what you were talking about, and I wanted to like put that in the room. I have so many other things that I'm thinking about, like subcultural spaces and what's political about them and their capacity to like support certain types of bodies or certain types of communities and togetherness, but I can't really like sum it into anything that would be a question.
Well, let's talk in another moment. Thank you. Yeah, the Chris Kraus was a huge influence for me. Just the I love Dick and her book on her biography of Kathy Acker. That I love the way she writes, and yeah, it's a huge influence. Thank you.
I mean, I'll go again if we can. I feel like this is a big subject to bring into the room when we have like 6 minutes left. But I wanted to ask about language as kind of something that might endure through all of this like temporary building and unbuilding that kind of moves on along with people. But there is some kind of intangible cultural heritage that goes along with that. Like people remember, I think. And then you're doing this work to kind of disseminate this work even in other languages. So it's kind of like a non-preciousness of form. But I guess my like, unformulated question is like, what remains? Does anything last? And do you want it to? I mean, is there like, and is language the way it does that?
Yeah, I guess in this kind of environment, well, the spoken word is the way, the spoken history, I guess, well, if we think on the AIDS epidemic, a lot of people passed away too young, and I think that this thing with memory, it's really of documentation, of archives. It's really interests me, you know. I'm trying to let something, you know, to let something stay, you know, to keep something of this ephemeral way of living, and of course is ambiguous because, well, we cannot turn it into stone, you know, we cannot. That is why it's so difficult, I guess, to approach it through academia, you know, because academia tends to transform things in monuments, you know, and I guess this is the drive, you know, between monument and document and movement and history, and yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious about any kind of like middle stage of durability that doesn't become etched in stone. And I'm thinking really, you started with that amazing quote from like a notoriously unfun person, Theodore Adorno. You know, a central preoccupation of his and like a lot of the Frankfurt School is like what remains in exile, you know, as this generation kind of driven out from Germany. And like Arendt writes a lot about holding on to German as a language, even as she began to write exclusively in English. And so I'm thinking about like translation there and kind of the need for some kind of durability when everything has been taken from you, when you've like left your home country with the suitcase. And that is also something like a trap to be worked. And when you think about how to build anything politically, like part of political work is to break down existing systems of oppression, but it's also to build something to replace it. And those don't have to be the same project, but I think from my perspective, ideally they lead into each other. So I'm looking for kind of, and you are doing work to kind of record a scene, a memory, I think so that other people can witness it or even use it. Is that something you think about? And I'm sorry, these are really leading questions.
No, I think about it a lot, and I think more than I would like to people write their memories for themselves, you know. This would be the better for me, you know, that everyone try to capture this thing and in a sense that makes sense for them, you know. I don't want it to be the official voice for any movement. I don't want to be part of it, anything like that, you know. But yes, yet there is this will of documenting, of remaining something, you know. I guess I don't know, fighting death. Thank you.
Well, ending on fighting death seems like the right place to be. Thank you so much for joining
Thank you,
us.
guys.
We really appreciate you. We really appreciate your time, your work, and being able to participate with you a little bit. I think I speak for everyone in the Party is Formed cohort, at least, that we all hope we meet you in person.
Oh yes, that would be great. I hope. No, I know that we keep on working together and thinking together, and I hope partying together. If any of you come to São Paulo, please get in touch. Auli, thank you for the sweet words. Well, let's keep in touch. I don't know if I can join the next lecture, but well, I'm with you in a sense.
Yeah, sounds good. You'll get an invite anyway, but thank you so much.
Bye bye, guys. Thank you so much.